Reproductive choice. I've discussed it before and no doubt we'll discuss it again. It's being used as a wedge issue to oppress America and to build a civil conflict in America so that the GOP can continue to have ascendancy over democracy in America, that people will be acquiescent to the sabotage of normal democratic processes, the suppression of normal voting, and the conducting of electoral fraud, as well as the inviting and enablement of help from foreign adversarial countries to have friendly officials installed to advance issues and causes that don't benefit the average American. And if that triumphs or continues to triumph in America, it bodes poorly for the rest of the world and for the democracies that have been hard won in various countries around the world. So the first point I'd like to share about reproductive choice is that people who are opposed it are vehemently opposed even up to and including the time that they avail themselves of abortion services. But at that point in time, they think, yes, other people still shouldn't have abortions, but for me, it's different. And I'm going to read to you a quote from an abortion provider who had this to say. "We have anti-choice women in for abortions all the time. Many of them are just naive and ignorant until they find themselves with an unwanted pregnancy. Many of them are not malicious, they just haven't given it the proper amount of thought until it completely affects them. They can be judgmental about their friends, family, and other women. Then suddenly they become pregnant. Suddenly they see the truth, that it should only be their choice. Unfortunately, many also think that they are somehow different than anyone else, and they deserve to have an abortion while no one else does." So the frailty of the human spirit, people who have adopted a certain position can see how, yes, everyone else should be forced to conform to that position, but their circumstances are exceptional. It's not evil or against God's wishes when they need to have an abortion because their personal circumstances require it. So to me, that's a very important point to understand the mindset of people who oppose abortion. They're doing so because they can see so clearly how everyone else is to blame. When they find themselves in difficult circumstances, they're clearly not to blame and they are exceptional. My second point that I wanted to make was some quotes from a satirist called Reductress. She appears to have an account on both Facebook and Twitter, and she makes some satirical points such as putting a mock-up of an Alabama senator with a fake quote saying, "We believe an unborn child should have the same rights as other American children too, including but not limited to getting shot," which is a poignant and cutting point. The Alabama senator who introduced the very restrictive abortion bill, I believe his name is Chambliss, when he was responding to an argument about IVF embryos and is it murder when they are disposed of, he cited a part of the bill that said it applies to a pregnant woman. The egg in the lab doesn't apply, it's not in a woman, she's not pregnant. So it's not that life begins at the moment of conception, it's only if the moment of conception occurs inside a woman that can be punished. These are all important things for people to consider because it's very easy to be judgmental. It's very easy to fall into blame culture and elevate yourself whilst thinking of how other people are letting the cause down. Other people are making mistakes. You yourself are just responding to circumstances, but other people are acting on their inherently flawed natures and are being inspired by the devil to murder children. If you've ever been in the position of potentially falling pregnant to somebody who you're not in a position to form a family with, then you may be more sympathetic to the idea that you could want to not proceed with a pregnancy. You could say, that was a mistake, or the contraception failed, I didn't intend for that to happen, I am not prepared to roll with the punches at this point in my life and have my life dictated by this accident of nature. Yes, nature wants us to reproduce, and hence we have nerve endings in our erogenous zones that cause us to bang together our bumpy biological bits and potentially fall pregnant. And without that, you don't have the same rate of replacement within a community. Yes, you need migration. So it's no surprise that the people who are anti-abortion also tend to be anti-migration, and they undervalue the contribution of migrants, both legal and undocumented, and they just want white families to have white babies and they're to be replaced. They fear the loss of identity from having a cheerfully pluralist society that accommodates other races and other religions and works together in harmony and peace. They don't believe in harmony and peace. They don't believe it exists. They think we're tricking them about it, and every instance of disharmony or violence confirms their own internal narrative that plural societies or multicultural societies are going to hell in a handbasket. Yes, so sexy, bumpy biological bits. I met a lady yesterday, and turned out she was very politically like-minded to me, and she suggested we have coffee together sometime. I was so excited. I said, yes, we can do that. And I meant a meeting of the minds, and clearly I'm so excited to actually physically meet somebody who thinks like me that I made a fairly potentially obscene gesture. I explained to her what I meant, and luckily she's endowed with a similar sense of humor, so we both laughed at that, and it didn't come off across as too much of a weird single white female moment. But be happy for me, I have found a politically minded, like-minded friend. And having moved countries, that's exciting to find kindred spirits. It's difficult. I always give my sympathy to Americans who must exist at the moment, particularly if you're blue in a red state, with people whose ideas you would find repellent. I find it repellent that people I know support the current Australian Conservative government. I find what they do to refugees repellent. It's not as if it's just restricted to one political party. Both political parties have been guilty of torturing refugees in order to deter them from Australia's shores, because it was made into a political football, or rather poison pill, by one particular conservative political party, and Rupert Murdoch has been there with his propaganda apparatus ratcheting up the level of everyday Australians' hatred and contempt for refugees. A lot of political ailments derive from people's contempt for others. So when you see a lot of the people on the right rail against abortion, they are making manifest their contempt for people who have things go wrong with their lives. They're saying if you accidentally fell pregnant, the government needs to force you to sit in the bed you've made because you were terrible. And they also believe that it's not people like them, that it won't happen to them, that it's poor people who are inherently bad, and I'm presuming as well they believe it's people of colour who get the majority of abortions, and that is true. It was women of colour were the majority of people dying from illegal abortions prior to Roe versus Wade. Was it 72%? Let me just check and see if I saved that particular figure. No, I did not. I did save something important though. Okay. Somebody pro-restrictive abortion legislation said, my body, my choice only makes sense when somebody else's life isn't at stake. So they're claiming that the baby's life is at stake, so you can't make the argument, my body, my choice. At least they're showing the capacity to think about the idea, but the limitations of that argument are as follows. Somebody points out, fun fact, if my younger sister was in a car accident and desperately needed a blood transfusion to live, and I was the only person on earth who could donate blood to save her, and even though donating blood is a relatively easy, safe, and quick procedure, no one can force me to give blood. Yes, even to save the life of a fully grown person, it would be illegal to force me to donate blood if I didn't want to. See, we have this concept called bodily autonomy. It's this cultural notion that a person's control over their own body is above all important and must not be infringed upon. Like we can't even take life-saving organs from corpses unless the person whose corpse it is gave consent before their death. Even corpses get bodily autonomy. To tell people that they must sacrifice their bodily autonomy for 9 months against their will in an incredibly expensive, invasive, difficult process to save what you view as another human life, a debatable claim in the early stages of pregnancy when the vast majority of abortions are performed, is desperately unethical. You can't even ask people to sacrifice bodily autonomy to give up organs they aren't using anymore after they have died. You're asking people who can become pregnant, i.e. women, to accept less bodily autonomy than we grant to dead bodies. Mic drop. That's a potent argument. Women have less bodily autonomy than corpses who are required to have given permission for their organs to be used to save lives, to save the lives of fully sentient human beings. But no, women aren't going to be allowed to have fetal tissue scraped from the inside of their uterus because they had an accident or they were raped or some member of their family forced themselves, which is also rape, but you know, incest is a crime that may include rape, but may not include rape if the person hasn't, actually you can't consent if you're under, statutory rape if you're under a certain age, isn't it? Anyway, I hope this conversation is important to people because it's important right now to stand up in a theoretical sense for women's rights to have a degree of bodily autonomy, because that issue is being used as a wedge topic. And the more we can at least persuade people, or at least introduce the idea without just shouting my body, my choice, but saying women have died from lack of access to abortion. The suicide rate of women in countries where abortion is illegal is much higher than in countries where access to abortion is legal. The United Nations has said deprivation of access to safe and legal abortion is a form of torture. And it would be. It would be torture to be forced to go through with a pregnancy that you had no commitment to and you had no desire to bring to completion. I have never had any abortions. I've had 2 children that I wanted, and I suffered so much through their pregnancy. I was like, what a secret it is how much pregnancy can suck. Yes, you can go around and people can congratulate you on glowing, and you can be a bit smug about it and go, yes, look at me, I'm a goddess creating life. But at the same time, the physically debilitating side of it is very little touched on. I remember making copious Facebook posts at a time when I still used Facebook, saying, oh, it's not really morning sickness, is it necessarily? It's all day flippin' sickness for some people, and I didn't realize that was a thing. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have tried to sign up for a master's degree at the same time as I was pregnant. Oh, whoops, I'm not supposed to talk about that. Whatever. I try and keep my own personal details reasonably private, but here I am putting my face and my opinions online at all hours of the day and night because I think the world is in danger. So I guess some of my privacy concerns don't seem so important to me anymore. But anyway, 2 children, 2 beautiful children, and it took a lot to create them with my body. It took a lot of energy, it took a lot of resolve to not eat the foods I was told not to eat, to do everything I could to bring them safely into the world. And the children who are born to women who have been forced against their will to continue with a pregnancy are not children with high chances of being well nourished, of being brought into the world without deficits from malnourishment, and to have that kind of support that really optimizes your chance in life. And that's not to say we need to go around killing children in poor families because we don't think they'll have a good chance at existence, but that we shouldn't interfere with the ability of a woman to decline to pursue pregnancy or decline to continue with a pregnancy. That's all I've got to say on this topic for the moment. I'm going to say something about the Mueller investigation because it seems to be ongoing. They're investigating the links between Wikipedia and Russia, which is why Chelsea Manning is supposed to testify, but she's going to refuse and then probably go back to jail. She doesn't want to admit she was working for Russia. She probably enjoys being feted by the left as being a paragon of virtue. I've seen the photographs of her at parties with the alt-right, so I'm already very primed to accept that she was working for Russia, and that her giving away documents pertaining to America's defense weren't just noble sharing of information for the sake of transparency and accountability, but that she was sabotaging her workplace because she lacks character. Yeah, I don't like Chelsea Manning. But the point is, what I like and dislike is not that important. None of our opinions are that important. What matters is whether the sum total of our opinions can be used to good effect, to build consensus, to reach out and introduce ideas to the unpersuaded, to the fence sitters, to the ignorant, to all the people out there who aren't as involved as we are with politics, to hear from us perhaps just a trickle of information that the Mueller report is ongoing, that William Barr may not have been being strictly accurate when he summarized Mueller's report to say there was insufficient evidence of obstruction. That's a palpable lie. There were buckets of evidence of obstruction, and Mueller felt constrained that he couldn't indict a sitting president. And maybe at some point we'll hear him explain why he couldn't indict the other people that really could have done with a good hard indicting. Don Jr., Jared Kushner, lots of people who've committed crimes, who have really made a mockery of the rule of law in America. For Donald Trump to get away with so many open instances of breaking the law, of violating the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, it must be very discouraging and frustrating. But at the same time, discouragement and frustration can be used to create a wellspring of activity and outrage, as long as we don't succumb to despair and despondency. So I know people put in a lot of energy for the midterms, and they would have liked that to just be then passing the baton to House Dems to then run with that and hold the Trump administration accountable. Looks like it's not as easy as that. We also still have to be there putting pressure on House Dems to pursue impeachment inquiries that will give them a stronger legal case to request documents and help expose the criminality and corruption and treachery of the Trump administration and all the bit players involved. Thank you for your time in listening to me. If you enjoyed it or have positive or at least constructive criticism, feel free to direct message me or leave a comment on my Twitter page. And I thank you for your time and attention. Bye. Oh, and all the best.